Hey guys, this is Hell Hades. This is a Raid Shadow Legends video. Guys, I want to talk about the topic of the moment, which is Hydra, and actually talk directly to Raid about what I think we could do differently here to try and just give people back the fun of Hydra. Like, tons of people, and I mean like tons of people, are saying, whether they do it or not, I don't know, but they're saying they're quitting the game. Yeah, the kind of like changes to Hydra have pushed them over the edge. They've had this game mode which, you know, they'd started to enjoy, and now they're finding it unenjoyable. And generally, it seems like people that are in that kind of like mid-game, they were really trying to progress, and they've been like full stopped. And I want to just bring up firstly, like one of these posts that Raid have made. So thank you for providing us with thoughts and extensive feedback about your experience recently with the changes to Hydra. They go on to say a few things here. So the primary purpose was to rebalance Hydra for Hydra Clash. We wanted to achieve the reducing the dominance of particular teams. Okay. And I don't disagree with trying to do this part. Like, overpowered teams shouldn't be, you know, 20x in the next level of team. I think that's silly. So I like what they were trying to do here. They're doing it through systematic and structural changes, okay? And then they're basically saying, like, rebalancing teams and tactics might not appear as efficient as a new state of things if compared to previous selves, but you can do some new diverse stuff. That's basically what they're trying to get across. Speaking of Trunda, we still wanted her to remain a good and valuable asset, maybe one of the best, but not overpowered. And actually, we've seen she's now crazy good for Arena as well. However, if she remains too strong against Hydra even after the rebalance, we might consider further changes. But they go on to say, we want your feedback. Like, we want to understand how you're feeling about Hydra. So I thought I'd do a video and just give you some thoughts and really what I'm seeing from the community as well. I'm just going to start by talking Trunda. This is a screenshot from Saf's run, where he's running a kind of like old school Trunda team, really, but without Yumiko's. Still like clocking up 1.3 bill points. So still doing incredibly high work. This is a screenshot from somebody who used the optimizer to find their best teams. And interestingly, the best teams are still these double Yumiko Trunda teams. And they're still probably 5 or 6xing the next best. So where they kind of said, look, Yumiko's not part of the problem, Trunda's the problem. I think you've got to look yourself in the mirror and just answer the question. If Yumiko can reset herself and everybody else, and you've got two of them doing that so that everybody does their best ability all the time, can that be a mechanic that should be in the game? I think the answer is no. I think that's crazy that Yumiko can reset herself. But it still looks like Trunda is top of the pile by a decent amount in terms of the damage. And this is like nearly a 3 billion key on Nightmare variations. I've still seen people doing like upwards of 7 billion on Nightmare with these Trunda teams. The people that have got like the crazy accounts. So I don't know really that they achieved what they wanted to achieve. And what's bad, honestly, is if you piss off tons of people and still don't achieve what you wanted to achieve in the game mode, then damn, that was a lot of wasted community sentiment, I guess. But for most players that don't have these kind of like full Kraken teams, you know, crazy gearing, absolutely maxed out area bonus stuff, you know, for most players, Hydra is now considerably harder. And if I go back a few steps, right, Hydra was unfun because you couldn't control enough of the fight. And by that I mean, you know, the provokes were hard to land. There wasn't enough people that did it. And things like I'm trying to think what changed to give us more control. Was it that Hex allowed you to hit the head of Mischief? There was a few changes that came in and suddenly Hydra became fun because you could control the fight. Maybe it was that you could provoke. Maybe we couldn't provoke before. I'm trying to think what it was. Anyway, there was a couple of changes that came in that massively improved Hydra. And they reduced some of the kind of like just general difficulty of how hard these heads hit. Okay, so suddenly we could start to strategize around how we're going to deal with the fight. The problem right now is too often we are seeing 4 undamageable heads. Okay, too often, this is from the content creator chat, but I've seen it a bunch of times myself. This is blazing here. Too often we're seeing this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nobody can take damage. And the problem with this as well is that not only can they not take damage, they're definitely taking a turn and they're going to do whatever they want to do. Now, there's still an element of we can control the fight. Don't get me wrong. Like, we could still land our debuffs here. But it's way more likely now that the Head of Wrath gets himself reflect damage up. And that's, honestly, that's what's killing me a ton. It's way more likely that's going to happen. It's way more likely the Poison Cloud gets his Poison Cloud out. You know, this head. So, and because these things are going on, the fight is more frustrating. It's more challenging, but it's way more frustrating. And I think that's where people are kind of losing the plot. So we've got a more frustrating battle. We've got less control of the fight again, going back a few steps from the previous change. And I think it's a real negative for Hydra. Having these 4 Serpent's Wheels up at any point is a real negative. I actually think the health you need to destroy, it's really, really bloody hard. Like, if you get late into Hydra fight and you've got to destroy this big chunk of HP and other stuff's going off, obviously, plus there's less turns. That part of it, I actually think they've done a decent job of, because that's the part where it's like you're getting diminishing returns for your team, and Hydra is meant to get harder over time. So, you know, that part of the battle for me, I think they've actually landed pretty well. But this part, I think, is an absolute joke, honestly. So I think there's a couple of things that could be done. If Raid are watching and want to try and find some cool ideas, firstly, comment down below with your ideas. But what I think we could do here is one of two things. Either some form of debuff stops this from working or reduces this. It could be something like all of the Hydra heads can now take poison, and for every poison on a head that's got Serpent's Will, you reduce the value of it by 25%. So if you had 4 poisons out everywhere, suddenly you can go do damage again. Or maybe I'm overcooking it. Maybe it's like you reduce the damage of it or reduce the effect of it by even 5%. So you can do some damage, or 10%. So you can do some damage. Suddenly, poisons, which are useless in the end game, become really valuable again, and certain champions would come to the forefront that have just been kind of like kicked to the curb. Also, you've then got a way to negate the problem. So that's one idea. And poison's just one of the debuffs. The reason why I chose poisons, because it's basically become a useless debuff for endgame. And I think it could be a fun way to bring it back into Hydra. The second option is there's some form of cooldown for Serpent's Will. And that could either be a number of turns cooldown, a bit like Odin's passive. So at the moment, I regularly get this head spawn, Serpent's Will. 1 second later, as if it's spawning at the same time, but it's not quite the same time, this head spawns, Serpent Will. This head spawns, Serpent Will. And you're like, wow. It felt to me like they should have, only one of the 3 should have had it, not all 3. So if there was a cooldown based on either turn count or if there's a cooldown just in terms of heads repopping, then this makes a lot more sense. So it could be something like 1 in every 3 of the heads that respawn get Serpent's Will, rather than every head. Or it could be every 5 turns taken by any person or enemy on the map, Serpent's Will becomes available again. So at least there's something you can try and manage within that. Because at the moment, I just think this is a joke. To be able to do 0 damage to any head for a full turn and just let them run riot, it's a joke. It doesn't make for a fun game mode. And obviously, you know, there has to be an element of fun when you're building this stuff out. So I think that's my 2 ideas. Either some sort of debuff that allows you to get in the mix again when Serpent's Will is out, basically pulling it back down to what it was in terms of damage mitigation, or a cooldown on the ability for it to pop back up. Because at the moment, it's not fun. And honestly, Raid, you're losing players without really getting the benefit of what you wanted to do. That's what it seems like to me. Anyway, let me know what you think down below, and I will see you in the next one.